favourite haunt of the Prime Minister of Spain when Parliament is in recess, and it's also a favourite place for King Juan Carlos, Queen Sofia and the Prince and Princesses to come to when they're having their holidays at the Marivent Palace in Palma, Mallorca. And they would always go along and meet up, not only with Joan but also his family. And I remember in the August of 2004 a wonderful programme on television showing Joan Riudavets talking to the Prime Minister, because of course the cameras, the film cameras, the television cameras, the press would also follow. Unfortunately, in June of last year he died, but when he died he was 1 month off becoming 115 years of age. He was the oldest man in the world at that time, recorded man in the world anyway. He'd been predeceased by that Japanese man some 6 months earlier. 2 Sundays ago, his brother died. He was 105. His other brother of 109 is still alive in Mallorca. I tried to change my name to Riudavets a few years ago, but I think all the damage was done in the UK. But very long-lived people, we've got 2 centenarian clubs. Out of the 33,000 Menorquian inhabitants of Menorca, the true Menorquians who can trace their history back, way back to the time when Alfonso III came across and re-inhabited the island in the 14th century with people from Catalonia. There are over 30 centenarians, and those centenarian clubs don't just sit around in old people's homes. They go out on coaches like this and visit each other every month. So they're very active. It's amazing how elderly the Menorquians can become. So a totally different landscape as we're cutting through the centre of Menorca here with these larger fields, which are typical of the central part. The field of maize on our left hand side, seeded about 7 weeks ago, and now as high as the elephant's eye. This is a catch crop that many of the farmers have tried for the last 10 years, as with the huge increase in the amount of cattle they've got and the milk quotas here on Menorca, they're actually producing as another form of silage. Many of the fields are being cut, harvested in the last week. That one's still to be done. And that beautiful house up on the left hand side, again from the 18th century, the largest single farm on Menorca. This is the guy who, a multi-millionaire, started farming, the son of the major cheese baron of Menorca, who died about 14 years ago at the age of 92. The man who started doing those little cheese triangles and slices of cheese for Kraft Foods, which you'll see in Mahon, the #1 factory on the island. Well, he got over 500 milk cows there. But I won't tell you too much about Kraft Foods, that it's just been sold to about 14 years ago. But suffice it as saying, just at the moment, all those little cheese triangles you put on your crackers and all those cheese slices in recent years with the Kraft Food labels start their lives on the beautiful pastures of Menorca since 1932. Because of course you'll be passing that factory when you're in Mahon, either tomorrow, either last week on Tuesday, or next week on Tuesday. I mentioned that Richard Kane wanted to link up the various parts of the island so he could move the military machine very quickly, and also so he could get food from one end of the island to the other. Just along here we're going to join Camden Kane, and for just about a mile, the only part we're allowed to drive with commercial vehicles, we'll drive along it, the original road of the island. It was started in 1712 and finished in 1718, and was actually built to very exacting specifications. I've already said that 85% of all the dry stone walls that you see around Menorca were built by the Arabs during the 300 years of their colonization. But there are many, many ancient walls from the Bronze Age which surround those little enclosures and tankies, especially on the southeast corner of Menorca. Again, on Easter Promise you pass by all those little tankies. But when Richard Kane was trying to build Camden Kane, he had a very specific specification for the dry stone walls along the side. He said they had to be 3 feet high, 3 foot wide at the base tapering to the top, and then a stone on edge along the top. And he had no one that knew how to build walls to that specification, either amongst his military engineers or the local people. So he sent to a friend of his, the Duke of Devonshire from Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, who loaned him 2 teams of dry stone wallers for a couple of years. They showed not only the British soldiers and the military men, but also the local people how to build them the British way. Unfortunately, he hadn't thought about the very heavy rain we get, and you've not seen anything this morning, the very heavy rain we get and the horrendous winds. And as the surface stone on the fields was not long enough to tie the 2 sides of the walls together, they soon started to split apart because they were filled with small pieces, rubble in fact. So halfway through the 18th century they changed the specification a little bit. They took off literally the stone on edge along the top, and they put a rounded cupping of cement on the top to seal. And now you see those 3 distinct types of walls on Menorca. Those from prehistoric times, those from the Arab times, and those from the British times. This wall that we're just passing here on either side has been rebuilt in the recent years, and is being built to the specification that Kane put out. But before they put the stone on edge along the top, they actually sealed the top of the wall with concrete. But further along here, you'll see where the original walls are and where they've collapsed. So the original Camden Kane, linking St Philip's Fortress at the head of the Port of Mahon through the newly being built town of Mahon, meandering right the way down the island to Coutadella, which was at that time the capital. An island just 35 miles long, with a road 58 miles long. It meandered about so much. But no finer way to see the interior of Menorca but by driving this with a hire car. The 50% of the island you can still drive. You go through the forests, you'll go and see a totally different landscape to the main road. After Mahon and Coutadella, this is the largest of our towns. Although we've got 6 towns. A man from Lancaster in County Durham, although you'd think he was from Tyneside by his accent, and his Menorcan partner started to produce some of the most fantastic leather garments you will ever see. Paul is the designer, and these are so untypical of anything that you'll see elsewhere. He's become very well known. It's a very, very good company. And you're going to see a short display of 3 young ladies parading down the catwalk and showing just a few of the garments that they actually produce. You're going to be offered champagne or juice, or if you're very crafty, get some champagne, put into the orange juice and make a box fizz. And one of my colleagues, Gillian, it should be Gillian anyway, will be giving you a commentary and telling you what these are all about. Now you can get leather garments all over. And of course you can get leather garments in just about all the fashion shops back in the UK. But you won't get leather garments like these. These are made of something entirely different. to what you would normally find. Normally they've been made out of cowhide, which has been split 2 or 3 times to make it thin and supple, and then dyed. But because it's a very tough substance, they can only dye it in very dark dyes. Here Paul uses lambskin. Not split, of course, it's already thin, but it is very supple and hard wearing and can be dyed, and in fact they have over 20 colours, I believe, from white right the way through the whole spectrum of a rainbow. So fellas, if you want pink trousers, you can have them. Paul also says the only way to buy leather garments is to have them made to measure. And here they make to measure within 36 hours and deliver them to your apartments or your hotels. For those people who go in just before, of course, they're going back off holiday, they have a courier service which takes them back to the UK and they're delivered to your door within a couple of weeks with no extra charge. They come with a lifetime guarantee, and I really do mean that, because Paul says, you know, people do get a little bit smaller or bigger and they do need altering, and sometimes they lose things like buttons, and I know that many people who have lost a button, he will actually send a complete new set of buttons free of charge, even after 20 years. I know people who send these back or have come back on holiday once more, because don't forget the majority of our holiday makers to Menorca